Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Thursday, December 27th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Oregon game is in 5 days. The game against Michigan in 337 days. Today we're talking to our good friend Ross Fulton, the X's and O's guru at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And when we have Ross on the show, we're sponsored by Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, proudly offering nationally acclaimed USDA prime steaks, seafood and sushi, impeccable service, live entertainment, and an attention to detail that is simply unmatched. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus, check out the menu, and make a reservation today. All right, so we're going to be looking back at the Ohio State defense, what they did well against Tennessee. Most of it worked. This is not quite as perfect as the offensive show was, but there's a lot of good stuff to that I think Ohio State fans are going to enjoy reliving and rewatching here. Let's start with the run game. We'll look at the how Ohio State used a term. This is a term that Ross has used when Ohio State first brought on Jim Knowles, spill and kill, and how that helped them really contain the Tennessee run game early on.
Yeah, the plan against Tennessee from the Ohio State defense was pretty simple, which was put numbers against the passing game, force Tennessee to run the football, and spill it outside. And so we saw a lot of 3-high defense from Ohio State. That's obviously a Jim Knowles staple from his Oklahoma State days, and post Oregon has increasingly become a part of the Ohio State package. This is probably on its most fulsome display on Saturday. And so, right away we see this is the second play of the game. They're in this cover 3 high with Caleb Downs as the middle safety. And we've talked about his role there as essentially almost like a Mike linebacker, because then you put the two actual linebackers on the outside hips of the defensive end. And as I said, so we're going to play cover 2. So the corners are sitting in the flats. So this also helps against Tennessee, a lot of cover 2 to when you have a hard corner, to take away some of the reliefs or make tackles near the line of scrimmage. And then, as I said, they're spilling the football, right? So we've talked about this as a problem before and how this was missing from Jim Knowles' defense here early in the season. And, post Oregon, it has made a significant comeback. So at the snap, both the defensive ends are pinching inside. Jack Sawyer takes on, this is a counter play from Tennessee, and Jack Sawyer takes on the block and forces, in the hole, which forces the ball to go outside of that, what's supposed to be a kick out block. And then you just have Caleb Downs as well as the linebackers there to clean it out. So again and again, we saw them, when you're doing this, obviously you are, your linebackers are pretty spread out, right? And that helps defend the relief plays and the wide splits we talked about from Tennessee. But so then you make up for that by forcing the football to go to the sideline. And so then it goes in the direction of where you have your linebackers and Downs at the snap.
All right, next up, we're going to be looking at, I'd like to tell you which play this is, and I don't know how to explain this other than this is the one where Nico Iamaleava got his helmet cracked. And otherwise, I'm just saying, well, there's good coverage, and then he scrambles and takes a big hit, which is 17 different plays. So this is the one of those where he gets his helmet cracked.
Yeah, and again, so this is sort of the other variation. I would consider this sort of a 3-high variation, probably is, I bet, how they define it. But you have Caleb Downs, instead of being the middle safety, though, he is as the apex, right? So you got these super wide splits. And you have Jordan Hancock, the nickel, and Caleb Downs basically flipping roles. So Hancock's one of the two deep safeties here. They're playing cover 2 again. Downs is at that apex position we've talked about, where he's sort of splitting the difference between the offensive tackle and the wide receiver, and that lets him play at an angle on the reliefs. Obviously he's a great athlete in space, so he can make up ground. And then on this play, Tennessee, we talked about those wide splits. Almost everything is a vertical route, and then a comeback if the route's capped, or in breaking dig route. So that's what you get here. And you get the seam route against cover 2, but Downs is able to carry the seam, right? We've talked about situations where you have a linebacker carrying a wide receiver. Well, here you have Downs doing it, which takes away that seam route, and the deep safety is able to cap the dig coming inside, which allows the pressure to get home. You saw a lot of this too, we just talked about against the run, the defensive end spiking inside. They did it a lot against the pass too, pretty successfully. It's sort of this is also how Jim Knowles, when you spike your defensive ends inside, you have it can take away, in theory, some of the pass rush, and you basically then the defensive tackles kind of read it and loop around. Fortunately for Ohio State, Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau were so successful attacking the Tennessee tackles inside that it worked out pretty well, because they were just beating them to the point of attack through the B gap and creating pressure. And, especially Tennessee, we'll get to some of the scrambles and whatnot, but everything for them is this half field read we talked about before the game. So if those first couple options aren't there, Nico he's kind of starts scrambling around and looking to make a play. And so, that obviously gave them some scrambles, but also created, a lot of opportunities for negative plays for Ohio State.
You heard a bunch on the broadcast about Ohio State having spies to try and keep Nico's scrambles as limited as they could. And I'm going to guess that is probably something you're going to hear a good bit as they try and figure out how to stop Dillon Gabriel and Oregon out in the Rose Bowl as well. But this is one where they had a spy and it didn't work. That doesn't necessarily mean you're stopping the quarterback from running. It just makes it a little harder, but you can still have the quarterback run even if you do have a spy on the field.
Yeah, this is, again, so cover two. And again, Tennessee obviously very spread out. And so you just don't really have anyone in the middle of the field naturally. And so what Ohio State does here, they did some different things to try to create a spy, but they use JT Tuimoloau out here as sort of the spy to prevent him from rushing upfield. Now, it doesn't work so well because he's able to get outside the pocket to the wide side of the field. And so, I think this one was less successful. Obviously, the majority of Tennessee's offense, I would say, came from either scrambles or, they use design runs. They use some lead QB draw. They use that lead outside zone run in sort of more third and short yardage. That's how they scored their touchdown at the end of the half. I guess on the one hand, obviously this is going to be an issue again with Dillon Gabriel in terms of his mobility. On the other hand, there's all trade-offs, and even when it got to 21-10 and people were concerned, does Tennessee have momentum? I mean, my thought at the time was they had to grind out a touchdown drive with 13 runs from their quarterback in the first half, and that's just that's a lot of hits for a quarterback to take. I mean, you talked about the helmet getting cracked. It's not a really sustainable way to maintain offense with QB draws and broken scramble plays. And so that was obviously a trade-off Ohio State was willing to make, at least against Tennessee. As I said, they definitely wanted to take away the vertical routes. They were not going to let those, receivers get past them downfield, force them to break off those routes and become hitches and curls and, box everything or, spill everything outside. And they take a few scrambles from him. He had some nice runs, give him credit for that. But as I said, it's just, I was at the end of the first half, I'm are they really going to be able to run their quarterback 30 times in this game? I mean, that's a lot of punishment to take.
Yeah, I mean, it felt like an ice bath outside on Saturday night in the Horseshoe. So I guess, it would have, I guess that's good for your muscles. I'm not sure. I'm not an exercise physiotherapist or whatever the term is. But yeah, that's one of those things where you can only use this so many times and then it stops working. But the scrambles were not the only times that Iamaleava got hit, because this next one we're going back to with 3 high coverage. And this is one where there's coverage and there's no one open and the pass rush gets there.
Yeah, I'd say the big change we saw against Tennessee was the variety out of the 3 high looks. Mostly this year, it's been at, Tampa 2, as we've talked about, where Downs is that middle pull runner. But we saw quite a bit of coverage variety, even from the 3 high pre-snap look. And so one in particular, a lot of cover 3, right? And so you present the 3 high safeties, but then Downs drops back as the deep middle of the field. The corners take their thirds, and it's a double buzz concept where both Latham Ranson and Jordan Hancock as the outside safeties come down and play that hook curl zone, right? So this is just cover 3. It's probably more, I say ran probably more cover 3 on Saturday than they've run all year. And obviously again, so that sort of caps those routes. Nico doesn't really, there's nothing much there. It creates a coverage sack. And I think, it wasn't just cover 3 though. We saw a little bit of cover 1 sprinkled in from this 3 high look. They ran some cover 4 concepts, or, they're again, playing 4 across, or even that, we talked about against Indiana, saw a little bit of, cone and bracketing where you're sort of double teaming, or, guy could take inside, the safety takes them, outside, the corner takes them. And so, just again, a lot of variety from like sort of the same high pre-snap shell. Talked about how Georgia did that successfully against Tennessee. I would expect going forward, like again, quite a bit of this against Oregon, in contrast to the last game plan. But quite a bit of 3 high, quite a bit of those cover 4 concepts they used against Indiana.
All right, and we're going to give one more 3 high look for you. This one is, if you're listening and you're not watching, this is the play where Davis Igbinosun broke the pass up and then celebrated for about 47 seconds after the PBU, just to be able to place this in your mind in terms of which play we're talking about here.
Yeah, if you want to imagine what it's like watching live with me, and that was please don't get a 15-yard personal foul right here. Please don't get a 15-yard personal foul. So again, like as I say, variety in the 3 high looks, and that just makes it really difficult, especially like on a young quarterback in terms of what he's seen. Ohio State brought very little pressure on Saturday. This was one of the few times, right? This is a hot concept, right? So it's like 3 deep. So again, from 3 high, another cover 3, but you're only having 2 underneath defenders in the seams. And then the 2 linebackers, you're bringing a double A gap blitz. And like we talked about how Georgia ran this a lot against Tennessee as well, because just again, the type of routes that Tennessee runs, like you're leaving a lot of that underneath zones open, but it's like so much of that, like either comeback routes or dig routes that you just don't have to worry about defending the whole field at times. And so that's exactly what you get here. Like you get, a bunch of comeback routes that you've got defenders for. And you're able to force that throw. Like Ohio State was definitely getting depth with their corners. Like even in cover 2, they'll sink back unless there's a flat threat to keep the route capped. But they were really aggressive breaking on the ball once that hitch came. Like you had this one from Igbinosun, and there was a one later in the game where Jermaine Matthews drove on the ball and had a really nice play. And so they're just able to cover a lot of ground. But yeah, so, as I said, very little pressure in terms of like adding rushers in this game. There's a couple times ran cover 0 on the Kenyatta Jackson, questionable personal foul. They ran cover 0 on the big Latham Ransom stop on that speed option. You could actually see like they need to go check to that because it was cover 0. Like speed option is in theory a good play against that, but Ransom made a great play and came up and made the stop. So I do think by contrast against Oregon, you will see more of the Indiana game plan on 3rd downs and long, where they're upping the pressure. Particularly, again, depends on how well they're doing with the front 4. But I do think they're going to want to try to move Gabriel off his spot more than they did on Saturday and make him uncomfortable. But you just have so much more variety in what they do now compared to that game. Like it's pretty incredible looking back at it, as opposed to against Oregon, where, you go back and look at the clips we talked about where Oregon was able to use motion and RPOs to like pull, interior run defenders out of a gap and have that unaccounted for, or, knew they were getting cover 1 and could scheme it up. Like now you're getting these, like a ton of these 3 high looks. You're mixing in cover 2, cover 3, cover 4. And you're really making things a lot more difficult on a quarterback in terms of what they're seeing, and just giving yourself more tools in the toolkit where you can spread out and account for the reliefs, but now you can spike the defensive ends inside and spill the football outside, as opposed to just having these open, B and C gaps.
Well, there you go. The last of the look back at the Tennessee, and a little bit of a look ahead at this week's Rose Bowl game against Oregon. Really looking forward to that one. We're going to try and have Ross on again before that game happens to take maybe a little bit of a deeper dive on the specifics of both offense and defense against the Ducks. Try and get that for you. It's going to be a wild week in terms of travel and schedules and all that kind of stuff, but we'll do what we can to make that happen. We also will be having plenty of conversations about all of this stuff on the Huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That is our member exclusive board. Get access to our whole team of insiders. Tony, Kevin, and I covering the team. Mark covering recruiting. Ross, Michael, Devin, Justin, the whole team, whole X's and O's guru team, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. Lots of talk about scheme, lots of talk about recruiting and transfer portal, and of course, all the stuff about the team as well. That is all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. And then I also want to thank our sponsors, Jeff Ruby's of Columbus, The award-winning upscale steakhouse in downtown Columbus, named one of the top 50 steakhouses in America by Food Network. Just go to jeffruby.com/Columbus to check out the menu and make a reservation for today. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.